My name is Chris, and today we're going to go over the details of the Triangle Borea BR03 stand mount speaker. Welcome to the Vinyl Attack. First and foremost, let me say that English is my first language. Without getting into a war of semantics involving England's English and America's English, I feel it's pretty clear that I am an American-born English-speaking person. Sure, I took a bit of German in high school, and I've tried in vain to learn Japanese over the years, which is next to impossible without someone to practice with. But outside of those, and the basic Spanish I've picked up on television, I am not a multilinguist. The point of this is simply to say that Triangle is a French company, and their language has some very particular sounds and pronunciations, both of which I am uneducated about, sadly. Thus, I will be avoiding at every turn trying to pronounce French names, places, words, and even foods in this video. It will save us all the pain of having to endure a butchering of what would otherwise be a lovely language. I will say that although the BR03 does in fact have a 0 in the name, everyone I come across that talks to this speaker simply calls it the Bro3. For the ease of clarity and familiarity with this speaker, I too shall refer to it as the Bro3 for the remainder. Indeed, another American ruining the title or language of a foreign country once again. Shall we move on? One of the important things I think that is often overlooked when it comes to discussing hi-fi products and reviews is the ease and responsiveness to communication with a company. Any company worth their salt offers a warranty of some nature for their brand new product, but thankfully, most of us won't ever have to use such a thing. This is probably why the topic of communication doesn't come up all that often. But let's pretend for a moment that you did indeed have an issue. What kind of response could you expect from this company? Now, I had no warranty issue or even talk for technical assistance with these speakers, but what I've learned in the past few months in communicating with product manufacturers regarding setting up review videos is that these people are busy. I'm certain that all the people with whom I've dealt are indeed friendly and would like nothing more than to answer any and all questions and inquiries in a speedy fashion, but in the real world that's simply not possible. They have many clients and reviewers vying for their time, and there are only so many hours in a day. So when the people at Triangle were so quick to respond to my emails, I took notice. After all, I'm just another internet nerd trying to get their product into my home for a review that will elevate the quality of my channel. Surely I'm not at the top of their to-do list. And yet, whenever I had a correspondence with Triangle, they were there with an answer before I knew it. How does this apply to you? Well, if I'm just another person in a pack looking for a product to review and they respond to me this quickly, imagine how quickly they would respond to you, the customer, should you have a problem. This speaks volumes to me, which is clearly why I brought it up, and I think it's something of which that you should take note. I'm quite comfortable in saying that in the unlikely event a problem arises, Triangle will be there to handle it with great efficiency. That's all well and good, and indeed important, but you're probably wondering, how does the damn thing sound? A fair question that I'm quite happy to discuss, but let's go over some of the speaker's details and sonic claims first, and then we'll talk about whether or not that was the case in my experience, and if you should consider the Bro3 if you're looking at a stand mount speaker in this price range. One of the great things about the modern hi-fi renaissance is that there are several reputable companies competing for your dollar every single day, which has driven the quality of the products higher and higher while still remaining vastly affordable by comparison. This speaker certainly falls into that category. The Bro3 has an impressive quality, an impressive build, fit, and finish with strong performance, and it's an excellent value for its asking price of under $500 at the time of this video. Inside the box, you can expect to find the speakers, of course, 2 nice grill covers that I never use because I like the aesthetic too much, a dual language user manual in French and English, and 8 adhesive rubber feet that you attach yourself. I liked this last bit as I tend to run only 3 feet on my equipment as much as possible for stability. Also, if a speaker stand you already own has a support system, you don't have to attach any feet at all to the speaker if you'd rather not. Another showing of attention to detail comes with a suggestion of using high-quality speaker cable, which we will not be discussing today, being used in equal lengths and how to attach them. Sure, for most of us this is a no-brainer, but keep in mind, every speaker is somebody's first speaker, and I like that they kept this in mind while typing the manual. I also found the suggestion of room placement a good idea. How many of us took our first or even second pair of bookshelf, stand mount, or even floor standing speakers and shoved them back into a corner or against the wall because we didn't know any better? Here, Triangle has taken the time to suggest that you should bring the speakers at least 40 centimeters or about 16 inches away from the back wall, about 50 centimeters or about 19.5 inches away from any side wall, while maintaining at least 2 meters, do the math yourself, between the speakers for the best stereo separation. I found these all to be good starting points as I fiddled about with the placing of the speakers in my room and checking out what sounded best to me. I used a slight toe-in position, aimed roughly at my shoulders, and I was all set to sit down and give these speakers a listen after spending several days breaking them in, a point we'll be revisiting soon. The BR03 is a two-way speaker with a 25mm silk dome tweeter and a 16cm mid-bass driver that is accompanied by 2 small front ports on the speakers, which some may not care for, but I found to be quite attractive in its layout. Sure, these are just a couple of holes in the speaker, but I thought the placement was well implemented in the overall design. You'll quickly see the 2-pronged surround outside of the tweeter, and that's its EFS, or Efficient Flow System. Essentially, it's a phase plug that's meant to unify the high-frequency diffusion and reduce the directivity regardless of where you place the speaker. The mid-bass driver is made of an untreated natural cellulose paper that intends on keeping the sound free from coloration. So, how did it do? To start with, I put in my ancient, that is to say original copy of the Desperado soundtrack. I've always had a fondness for this CD, and it has a plethora of different sounds and styles on it, which helped me to pick out the strengths and weaknesses of the BR03 relatively quickly. Much of the sound reference I'll be making in the beginning here will be about this disc because of that. Not to mention the performances here are simply outstanding. The nylon acoustic strings in the intro of the first track, again whose name I shall not try to butcher, was noticeably prevalent and clear. If you're not familiar with the differences between a nylon string guitar and a standard steel string, the nylon string has a much warmer and kind of rounder sound that can be harder to portray accurately as it's much more subtle. The BR03 had zero difficulty here, and it was impressive right out of the gate. Antonio Banderas sings on this song, and not only is it surprisingly competent, his vocals had presence and sat just on top of the mix, making them easy to hear without being overpowering. On Six Blade Knife, which is a classic Dire Straits piece, the soft hi-hats during the intro were subtle, yet again easy to hear and identify. Their detail were crisp and tight like a hi-hat cymbal should be, but I was impressed with the dynamic range of the speaker being able to keep the softer parts legible and never washed out. Mark Knopfler also had soft sections of vocals on this track, and the proximity effect of the microphone came through easily. Minor mouth noises and inflections were there, but not distracting. Subtle details like these can often get lost in the mix, but none were lost here. The speakers had good imaging all the way around, and the instruments sounded like they were right where they should be, including the percussion that comes in later in the song, which had excellent instrument separation and physically made me smile when they entered the piece. Jack the Ripper by the legendary Link Wray, for all its positives, is an absolutely harsh-sounding recording. It's simply a lower fidelity piece that can often come across too bright and biting on a fairly revealing speaker and system. I was concerned that this may be the case here as I played the BR03s using my Hagel H90, which is also notorious for being a very neutral integrated amplifier that simply gives you what you feed it. From time to time with brighter speakers this can be a bad match, but I was happy to hear that this wasn't the case with these speakers. Although Jack the Ripper is an unforgiving recording, the combination of amp and speakers kept it just under the line of unpleasantness. And while it didn't do anything to smooth out the sound, it also didn't do anything to offend. A moment that made me sit up and take notice was on the track Bulletproof, which is a piece composed and performed by Los Lobos. It had a very dirty sounding and slightly overdriven bass intro that I was so convincing I almost went to check the speakers to see if they were damaged. The agility and the texture in the bass in these speakers was that accurate. While not the last word in low authoritative sound, this is generally what you can expect from these speakers in that regard. Well-articulated, quick and agile, responsive bass. Moving into something more cacophonous, I did another deep dive in my CD collection and put on the single studio album release from Zakk Wylde's first offshoot band, Pride and Glory. The very first and most widely known song from that album, Losing Your Mind, starts with a banjo before kicking into high gear with unabashedly loud 3-piece southern metal music. This is another relatively raw and unrefined recording that I wanted to test to see how well the BR03 would handle its untamed highs and raucous guitars. Once again, I was happy to hear that things never got out of hand, too bright, or left me wanting to take a break from listening. Zach's vocals sat right at the top with clarity and never lost their way. When the band goes into what can only be described as an all-out jam session during the lead guitar section, everything was identifiable and nothing got washed out in the chaos. The replication of tone was most on display here for me, simply because I'm so familiar with what's being used to record. For years, I've played Les Paul guitars through Marshall amps, and that's what Zach's staple was during this era. His extensive use of wah pedal during leads was identifiable to me as watching it happen live, and this speaker truly flexed its muscle when it came to this playback. Loud, strident, and brash guitars and drums can't be the only measure of a speaker, however, so I put on a wonderful collection of classical music I'd received as a gift for making a pledge to my local public radio station a few years back. This compilation started with the William Tell Overture, and right away the horns absolutely sang on these speakers. They were full, lush, and exciting, and everything I would want to hear from a horn, especially at this price point. The galloping melody makes you want to tap your foot with delight as you think back to the Lone Ranger riding on to save the day, or at least it did for me anyway. Strings were no different. During a movement from Vivaldi's Four Seasons, you were easily able to hear just how delicate they could sound, yet how powerful and broad when the dynamics called for it. The string ensemble had every piece in place and it sounded wonderful. A piece I wasn't familiar with from John Adams entitled Short Ride in a Fast Machine made me take note again of the accurate soundstage, a percussive wood block intro that could easily be identified as being set back in the orchestra made way for the horn section and snare drum while never losing its place. From pianos to harpsichord, flute, or drum, each instrument was as it should be with the Triangle BR03, and I was pleasantly surprised on more than one occasion with its performance. But no product is perfect, so what didn't I care for with this speaker? Well, I've heard many make mention of the treble in the BR03 being harsh or too bright, and in the beginning I can certainly see why. Right from the box, this speaker leans more forward and heavy in the top end. If you don't spend some time running them in, you might get a false sense of what they can do. I spent the better part of 2 weeks playing these speakers daily while I went about household chores or went out to run errands, and I still feel they could use just a little more time to settle in and become their own. Many people might not have the patience for that, and sadly, they'd be missing out. The bass is another issue. As mentioned earlier, it is articulate and quick, but it simply lacks some of that low-end oomph that you can find in other speakers around this price point. I'd imagine it has much to do with an old adage I've read that says you can have 2 of the 3 following things in a speaker: a small footprint, a deep low end, or a high efficiency. You won't get all 3. The BR03 seems to reinforce this principle. While it has a smaller footprint, as in it's a stand-mount speaker and not a floor standing, and it's easy to drive at 90 dB sensitive, it will never give that authoritative low end for which some people clamor. When compared to my ELAC Unify UB5 stand mounts, the BR03 just couldn't go as deep, even though they both measure a low frequency range of 46 Hz. The ELACs, however, are a fair deal harder to drive with their 85 dB sensitivity, which still only gives us 2 of the 3 categories. So if you're a bass aficionado, I wouldn't overlook the BR03, but you will want to allocate money in your budget to allow for the purchase of a subwoofer to round out your sound. Personally, I feel that way about all stand mount and bookshelf speakers, but I know many people are looking for an all-in-one solution. The last thing would be their ability to fit everywhere. That is to say, when choosing a speaker or an amp or any other hi-fi accessory, you should be able to count on that product to perform equally as well on all styles of music. While the BR03 isn't necessarily lacking in that department, jazz and classical people will smile ear to ear with this speaker's performance, but the rock and metal crowd just might need that sub to get the excitement they're craving. If, however, your budget is around the $500 mark and you value excellent sonic replication with attention to instrument detail and soundstage with quick, articulate bass, I'd say the Triangle BR03s are definitely something that should be on your shortlist for consideration. I know that they would certainly be on mine. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to go watch Desperado again. I'd forgotten how much I love that fucking movie. Thanks for dropping by to check out this review, and if you have any experience with the BR03s or you have any questions about it, please drop a comment below. And I look forward to next time.